What's that sound? It's For Amusement Only, the EM and Bingo Pinball Podcast. Welcome back to For Amusement Only. This is Nick Baldridge. I have a special guest today, Charles Rowland, who is the proprietor of Games People Play here in Richmond, Virginia. Charles has been operating and working on games for a very long time, as we'll hear shortly. And for those of you listening from other areas, Colonial Heights and Petersburg are about 30 minutes away from Richmond itself, so pretty close by via car. All right, without further ado, here we go.
Games People Play.
Hi, Charles.
Yep.
Hi, this is Nick from For Amusement Only. How are you?
Alrighty.
Well, first, Charles, do you mind telling me your age?
I am 63.
63. And how long have you been in the amusement industry?
Well, that depends on how you want to define it, because, I had games of my own when I was, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, whatever, and then I got a real job after college, and then in 79 I bought a foosball parlor, and ran that for a while, and ended up closing that and being a street operator starting in 1980.
Wow. And the foosball parlor, were there any games in there aside from foosball?
Well, originally they had an operator, and when I bought the place, I put that operator out and bought my own equipment. My first video was Space Invaders, and my first brand new pinball was Williams Flash.
Wow. Okay. So you've been operating in the Richmond area for some time.
36 years.
Yeah. And you currently operate games today, is that correct?
That is correct.
Good to hear. So, bingos. What was your first bingo experience?
My first bingo experience was that I was looking to buy games or get more games because I had found these games at the dump. I had a jukebox I had bought when I was the Christmas I was 12, and so I wanted more games, and I had a relative of my mother's, a cousin of my mother's, and he had a drive-in movie theater, and he had an old Rockola Wurlitzer, whatever, a 78 where the platters swing out and the turntable comes up to the middle. And so she had me call him and ask him where to get stuff, and he told me I should go get a Billboard magazine and find a distributor in the area, whatever, and go talk to somebody. And so I had my father take me up to talk to Harry Mosley, who was running Roanoke Vending Exchange on Broad Street, which is where Chipotle Grill is, right across from Willow Lawn now. And they were a distributor for Road Jukeboxes and Williams Pinballs. And so I talked to him, and he was saying, well, if you want some games, you need to go get a job working for an operator. And I was 15. I didn't even have a driver's license. But came back. My father was adding on to the house, so he was busy with the construction of that. So he had my mother drive me over to Virginia Music and Novelty on the Boulevard in Colonial Heights, and I went in and applied for a job. Now, sitting in the main shop area was a bingo, which I had never seen before. Mm-hmm. And a bunch of the guys were standing around or whatever, and I came in and I said, hey, I'd like to apply for a job. And so Johnny Condelius, who was the office manager or whatever, he takes me around to the back of the bingo machine, and he opens the door to the back of the bingo. Now, all the, mixer gears and everything is odds units are running, that's just a mass. Anyone who's ever seen the back of a bingo knows how all that stuff kind of fits together when the door shuts, but when it opens, there's a lot of mechanics there. Mm-hmm. And he asked me, do you think you can fix that? And I said, after looking at it and being a cocky guy, and I'd fixed pinballs and jukebox and worked on stuff, figured out how things worked, I said, yeah, I think I can fix it. And so he said, okay, start on Monday. So then they called back, turned out I was too young to actually work. You had to be 16, so I had to go down and talk to a judge in Petersburg and explain to him that I already knew about working on pinball machines and stuff, because they didn't want you to get your fingers caught in some sort of machinery. And so he said, well, it sounds like you know what you're doing, so I'm going to give you approval to get a job. Huh. So I went to work at 15 at Virginia Music and Novelty. And one of the jobs I had, besides riding with somebody else to do collections or to fix pinballs or whatever, was that they had me reclutch a bingo.
Wow.
And I assume you know what reclutching a bingo is, where you have to take the whole back door off the hinges, lay it down, and that big mixer unit on the top, you have to disassemble that. Mm-hmm. And it has leather clutches, little disc made of leather, and they're soaked in neat's foot oil, and the discs are held in place until some solenoid releases them. So that allows it to change the odds and stuff as these discs go around with their wiper fingers making contacts. And so we had like a Duke's mayonnaise jar full of neat's foot oil, and you would dig in there and you would get out your clutch pads, your leather clutches that had been soaking for weeks in there, and you would take it all apart, keep track of the order that everything came out as you pulled the shaft out of it. And then you put it all back together with new clutches, and then you took the old clutches and threw them in the jar for the next go-round. So that would take you about 2 or 3 hours, whatever, pulling that down, putting it back together again. And apparently no one else liked to do it, but I had a lot of patience, so I didn't have any problem with it, and I probably reclutched 3 or 4 bingos.
Wow, okay. And so were you involved in the collections on the bingos?
Yep. After I got a driver's license, I'd go and do collections as well. Sometimes you had places like Crystal Lake in Hopewell, where there was a lake, because back then not every house had air conditioning, and so people would go to these lakes, Moore's Lake, Crystal Lake, Heyday's Lake still exists out on in Verona. And anyway, so they had a pavilion, a 2-story pavilion, and on the bottom was a snack bar and pinball machines lined up on the wall, and then upstairs was a dance hall, and they would bring groups in, Bill Deal and the Rondells or the Showmen, or people who were, big beach bands back in the 60s would come in, play on the weekends and stuff up there. So we would go down, and you'd not only have to collect, but there might be problems with pinballs. So as one of the early tests on my first day, I rode with one of the other guys, and so he kind of explained the bingos to me on the payoff and how that worked, and was kind of inquiring whether my parents would have a problem with that, working with these with basically gambling equipment and all. And then we went on down to Crystal Lake, and so he said, okay, well, this one's got this problem. They tell you what the problem is. This flipper's not working, or some kick out, or something's hung, or score reel's hung. So he said, okay, you got the keys, go and open that, fix that. So he's working on one, I worked on another one, and then worked on, 2 or 3 of them that morning, and came back, and they said, well, what did he do? And he said, well, I don't think there's a pinball he can't fix. So I guess that sealed the deal. And so, I rode with other people, or I repaired stuff in the shop, or something new would come in, and I'd unbox it, and I'd set it up and get it ready for location, put locks on it, that kind of thing.
Do you remember which titles were the best earning for you? Bingos?
I don't recall. You see, a lot of times on the bingos, we had some of the ones with the rotating numbers, but everyone wanted like county fairs, roller derby, silver sales that had the moving screen.
Right.
And although, the Golden Gate and stuff had that golden section in it, they weren't that popular. You had to have particular people that knew how to play that deal. As far as the pinballs, the first new pinball I saw come in was a Williams Apollo. Mm-hmm. And I believe the price on it was $450 brand new.
Nice.
Later, we got a Hayburner 2 in, and that came in with some sort of shipping problem. Some piece of metal got bent up in the horse race part, up in the head glass or whatever, and I had to straighten that out. But you didn't really you got a few new games here and there. Remember Bally Safari coming in, had the Tiger on the thing, and with the play on the Exxon Tiger, had a tag on his tail that said, "Put me in your tank," because, the Exxon Tiger in your tank kind of thing. We had, I remember getting a Bally World Cup soccer where the men run up and down the field with the pulleys and stuff, and that was hard to play. But a lot of that was just kind of coverage, so you could put a bingo or a jukebox or something else in there. But we had bingos all over, and we had them in places that if you look from the outside, you'd never think there was anything like it. There was this place in Petersburg called Miss Kitty's Market, and when you went in, it had like an old wooden storefront type thing, and you went in, and there were slanted bins where the beets and the ears of corn and tomatoes and carrots and stuff would be like a farmer's market, but inside the front of the store, and it had the old store counter, but it had a lattice work kind of in the middle of the place, dividing the back half from the front half with a doorway cut in the lattice work area. And once you went past the lattice work, there was like 6 or 8 bingos in there. And everything was on nickels. Mm-hmm. So after the first summer, Bill Browning, who worked there and who was the guy that took me out the first day, he had come up with taking Williams baseball sequence units, buying the frames, the cams and stuff, and he drew a schematic for adding those to a bingo to convert them from nickels to quarters. And so when I went back to school after the summer, I got a call saying, "Hey, can you come in and work on Friday nights?" And I said, "Well, I guess what am I going to do Friday night?" And they said, "You're going to build these sequence units for these bingos."
Oh, okay.
So on Friday night, I'd come in and work Friday, let myself in. There were the parts there, and I would build and wire up the sequence units to go into a bingo to convert it from nickels to quarters. So when you put a quarter in, it would put 5 credits on it.
Right.
And so then Saturday, I'd come in the morning and then install those into the bingos.
Okay.
And then after, we had gotten most of those done, then I would just do the Friday night service calls, and somebody need change or there's a problem, pool table jam, something like that. And then Saturday we'd come in and we'd work about a half day, and that was good money even when school was going on.
That's good. Yeah, so did you ever work on any of the later bingos, the 20 holes that had the
No, the 20 holes in the 60s, the Johnson Acts had come out already, and so you couldn't ship stuff across state lines anymore. Right. Although we did have a game that Bally came out with in the 60s, had no flippers on it, and was called Fun Cruise. And all the parts inside this pinball were bingo parts. Mm-hmm. It was like a pinball machine made with bingo motors, relay banks, step-up units, all that stuff, so that it was their way of circumventing not being able to actually ship a bingo part across state line, but you could ship this whole game across state lines.
And then...
Oh, we just stripped it for parts.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask.
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
Okay, well... did you ever work on any of the later bingos, not the 20 holes?
Well, the 20 hole, the thing was the 20 holes came out. In fact, before even the 20 holes, they were just starting to come out late 60s from what I could tell working then. Bill Browning had some flyers on the stuff, and he had a flyer on that big wheel where it was a circular wheel with the holes. Now, I understand some people later had those in the 70s in Richmond, but people didn't know how to play them.
Yeah.
And that was the biggest thing, is that, you knew certain hole combinations and you moved the screen. And when you threw in this totally new concept, a lot of they didn't want to learn them. They wanted to play what they knew. And if it had been that to begin with that you learn on, then it wouldn't have been as big a deal. And then the 20-hole stuff, that was the whole same thing. People didn't understand the 20 holes, and they didn't want to learn the 20 holes. So, I mean, even into that, up until the end of the 70s, when the video pokers came in the 80s, which basically put the bingos out of business, everybody around here wanted to play 25-hole games.
Mm-hmm. And do you enjoy playing bingos?
Well, I enjoy playing them just from the challenge of it. And occasionally we've had them come through here. But, the problem is, there's a guy in town, Chuck English, who used to work with me, at Virginia Music and Novelty, and he's older than I am. And he will, if you've got a bingo that's got issues, he'll work on it, but he will not just fix one problem. He will not do anything unless you agree that he's going to do the whole game.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Because it's no sense doing part of it and then be called back, a week later with something else.
Right. Yeah, there's a lot of parts that get dirty. Yeah. So, this would have been before your time, but were there any one-ball games out on route?
We actually saw, we had had games at what used to be Camp Pickett, which is now Fort Pickett, and we had the NCO club, and we had at least one-ball horse race machine there, and I know we had an upright machine there, if you know what those are. It's just like kind of a vertical slot machine where the lights behind the figures and stuff. You try to get three in a row lined up. But generally speaking, most of that horse race one-ball stuff was gone by then, because the bingo was more fun to play. And some of the crazy things that happened with bingos, anybody that knows anything about bingos know that when you're trying to increase your odds or build up your features or whatever, and every time you put money in or operate the buttons to put a credit, to use a credit, all the lights flash on the glass. They mean nothing.
Right.
They're just there for anticipation. Just like watching the reels on a slot machine spin, and you're anticipating it stopping at different things to see if you get a winning combination. Those lights are just flashing. So one day, one of the guys went in to a truck stop in Colonial Heights, and there were scorch marks on the glass. And they were trying to figure out what's with the scorch marks on the glass. And they finally found the guy that was responsible, and he was using a lighter. He was trying to get the light bulb warm enough so it would stay on.
Well, That's someone who didn't understand how it worked.
That's right. Now, occasionally you would get some guy would get angry and throw something at the head glass and break the glass. And for a while they, had reproduction glasses and, early plexiglass, because then they wouldn't break. Mm-hmm. Well, they put the plexiglass on there, and then guys would heat up little thin wires and burn a hole right through the plexiglass and turn the dials on the replay meter to put credits on. Mm-hmm. So then you had to put a piece of glass glued to the back of the plexiglass to keep people from cheating that way. Mm-hmm. And, of course, on the inside of the machine, you had to have all kinds of metal, because guys would try to drill through the sides and put wires through to either keep the credit meter from running down when they were playing off credits, or all kinds of other crazy stuff.
So what was the craziest thing you saw in the bingos that were on location in Richmond, or in the area?
The craziest thing? Well, I know I did a crazy thing one time. We had these, you had 2 truck stops on the boulevard in Colonial Heights, and one of them, we had 2 bingos in the area where you'd come pay for your gas and stuff. And then they had a diner adjacent to that, and we had a jukebox in there. And so there were 2 bingos in there, and I was with an older guy, Paul Lamb, who worked for the company, who was probably my age now. He was probably in his 60s then, and some guy had been playing one of the bingos and had walked away and gone over to the counter, and I thought Paul said, tilt that. Thought he wanted me to just tilt the game and get rid of that game so that somebody else could come up and play it. So, I go over there and I just hit it with my hip, to tilt the game. Mm-hmm. And then you could have heard a pin drop, and everybody's staring at me, and Paul says, I said, don't tilt that game. And the guy was going to get changed to buy extra balls.
Whoops.
So we had to slide this bingo away from the wall enough to get the back door open to reach my hand in, reset the tilt relay on the relay bank so this guy could play, and he just had the most disgusting look on his face. And of course he buys the extra ball, makes a shot, doesn't get it, and just leaves with this look on his face like he could kill,
That's rough. So, now when we first got connected, you mentioned exhibit games. So did you operate any wood rails?
No, I never operated wood rails, but in about 75, somewhere around there, Ms. Killebrew, her husband had a game business, a route in Petersburg called Southside Vending Exchange, and he died, but she kept operating the business. Now, they dated back to the 30s, and she had a dirt basement and I went down there a couple of times, and they were just like old slot machines and console slot machines and old, P10, P20 Wurlitzes from the 30s and all, and the moisture had gotten to a lot of the cabinets, and the sides fell in 4 different directions, and the mech would fall right in the middle.
Yeah.
And but she had, on the first floor, she had a whole bunch of jukeboxes. I tried to put her together with a guy to buy the jukeboxes, but then upstairs on the second floor, she had pinballs stacked up. And so we made a deal. I think we paid somewhere around $35, $45 per cabinet and bought 65 pinball machines and rented a 26-foot Ryder truck, and got my father and my father-in-law, and we hauled out all these pinballs. And I had a partner that had a fish store on South Side, and he had some extra space in behind some walls, so we stored the stuff there. And we were fixing up a lot of these pinballs, and a lot of them were dating to the 40s that didn't even have flippers on them. They were pre-1947. And some of them were World War II conversions. And it was interesting for me with the exhibit supply, because where other machines would have a sequencing motor, such as if you had a 50-point deal, the motor would run and close a circuit 5 times or whatever with a cam with 5 raised areas on it, close a switch. Exhibit supply had no motor, yet they scored 50-point and 5-point increments, and they did it with a bunch of latching relays, and basically one of them was basically a solenoid with some switches, and it was mounted so the plunger would fall with gravity, and so once you hit the 50-point contact on the play field, it would latch a relay, and that would cause a step-up unit to step up, and then that, when it got to the max on the pull to ratchet that, it would cause this other relay to come in. Well, that relay would then turn off the stepping up the points and stuff until this thing would do 5 points, but there was no motor involved in it. They used like a stepper, and this relay, they called it a gravity relay.
Huh.
And it would just provide a delay, and when the stepper would get to the 5th point, it would stop. And that would, your score stepper was tied to it so that they would both step together and you'd get your 5 increments in your score.
That's interesting. It sounds like that would cost a whole heck of a lot more than just a motor, though.
Well, it was probably during the war, and copper was in shortage. So
right.
A motor, you'd have to have all these windings and stuff for the motor, and you only had to have the 2 coils or whatever. I don't know.
I guess
it was kind of unusual, and of course a lot of early exhibit supply stuff. When I was going to the dump, bringing back stuff, I found this piston assembly. It was a pneumatic piston assembly, and I had ESCO on it for Exhibit Supply Company, but I didn't know what that meant then. And basically a lot of the early pinballs where you had a coin slide, you put the coin in and you push it in, it would slide a board underneath the play field and would drop the balls down, and they would roll down to where you had a ball lift to shoot them. But in the process of that board coming back, it was spring-loaded, but they didn't want it to come back quick. So they had a pneumatic release that allowed this board to slide back slowly, and as it slid back, it would close contacts to reset the scores and do all that stuff.
Interesting. Wow. Yeah, I have a exhibit mystery. That's 1947, and of course they used a motor. That was post-war.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, they don't have one of those piston assemblies either. I guess that's one of the things that they changed from pre-war to post-war.
Well, a lot of that stuff back then, remember, was battery operated.
Yeah.
And some of them had a timer mechanism on them as well.
Right.
That after you finished a game, after about 2 minutes, the timer ran out and would turn off the power to the game until you put another nickel in and push the slide in, which would reset the timer, mechanical, timer release, almost like an egg timer on a stove kind of thing. Mm-hmm. But it had an arm that stuck out, and when you push the slide in, it would reset that timer, which would then power up the game again, and then the board would slide back slowly, reset all the scores, and then you'd shoot your 5 balls, and then when that was over with, if you didn't put another nickel into play, eventually it would shut it off so it wouldn't run the battery down.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's one thing I've always wondered is how long those batteries might have lasted, but I'm not sure who I could ask about that. So.
No, some of the stuff, you hear about stories, a lot of them, the early stuff, was gambling machines.
Right.
I had a Bally Jumbo, which was the first game that was close to the size of pinballs today, and it had holes on the playfield. It was a 1 ball, and you shot the ball up, and they had holes marked like 20 and 10. and 40 and that kind of thing. And basically, if you got a ball in that hole, it had a payout unit that would run, and it was would operate a slide mechanism to drop 2 nickels at a time. And when it got up to the right, your contact would enable it to a certain point, then it would hit insulation and stop. So the biggest payout on it was 200, which would pay you $2 in nickels. And then it had a swing-out door at the bottom, a tray like that would pivot, and then you could get your nickels out, and otherwise you wouldn't know there was any payout on it.
Mm-hmm.
Paul Lamb told about one time there was some game that had 4 pumpkins and the harvest moon or something, and if you got the 5 balls in all the holes, it would pay out, $3 or $4 or something.
Huh.
And so it was in some restaurant like in Blackstone or somewhere. And he got a call from the guy, you got to come over immediately, come over right now, you got to come right now. So he gets over there, and all the curtains are pulled in the front of the place, you can't even see in it.
Huh.
And he knocks on the door, and the door cracks open, and the guy's standing there with a pistol in his hand. And he says, come in quick. So he comes in, and the guy slams the door shut and locks it. And he says, what's going on? He says, look. And the machine had so many nickels in it, the bottom fell out. And there were nickels all over the floor of the restaurant. And the owner had made everybody leave at gunpoint so that they could get all the nickels up on from the pinball machine.
Wow. So, do you have any EMs in your personal collection, or?
I had some different things. I had a Williams Nags. I had a Baffle Ball by Gottlieb, their first, and I had a Genco Skyrider. These were countertop pinballs. I had the Bally Jumbo. But once you're a single guy, and I'm not sitting around playing them at my house, and so I got stuff at the shop, so I can play stuff all I want.
Yeah, that's true. So do you, it sounds like you tended to favor, at least at one time, the pre-war countertop style.
Well, all that stuff was interesting. It's all interesting when you've got family, nieces, nephews, children, whatever, people coming over, and everybody wants to know about this and that, and what's this, and, that kind of thing. But when you're living by yourself, I had, a Williams 10-strike bowler, and I had the Nags at my condo and stuff, but, you play that stuff with other people.
Yeah.
So with the stuff at the shop, people come in, they play stuff, you answer questions on it. It's, it makes more sense. And I'm here at the shop more than I am at home for the most part.
So, now you're over on Dabney Road, is that right?
That's correct, just off of Westwood Avenue.
Excellent. And what hours are you available there?
I'm usually here, 9 to 5, Monday through Friday, and then on the weekends, a lot of times I'm in and out. I use Saturdays and Sundays to get stuff done when the phone's not ringing, and I don't have some other employees are on service calls or whatever for the weekend, so I don't have to deal with any of that. It's a little quieter, and I can get stuff done. But usually I'm, unless I'm at an auction or something out of town, I'm here on Saturdays and Sundays during the afternoon.
And you just came back from an auction here recently. I
did. Went to Sevierville, Tennessee.
You pick up anything good?
I picked up a Checkpoint Data East pinball with their first dot matrix with the half-height display. I have another Checkpoint and a Hook here that have multiple board problems, and So I wanted something working all the way, particularly a display where I could try the other boards in and then narrow down problems and isolate so I can get all these pinballs going.
Sounds like a good idea. Those half-height displays can be a problem.
Well, that's the biggest problem now because people, they were making LED ones for a while, and Rotten Dog was making those, and then apparently they stopped. I was ordering one in Germany, and then I kept getting these emails in German and never got the display. So I don't know what the story is on it now. Of course, they don't make the glasses anymore.
Right. Yeah. Last I heard, I thought X-Pen or one of those guys was trying their hand at it, but they hadn't finished prototyping yet.
Yeah, I've used some of the X-Pen on the full-size dot matrix.
Mm-hmm. So, back to EMs here. What kind of manufacturers' games did you run? Obviously, Bally for the bingos, but
a lot of Williams stuff. There were a few Gottliebs. I'm not a big fan of the Gottlieb. I always hated the flippers with that spring-loaded wire deal coming out the side of the cabinet to operate the switches on the playfield. I thought it was chinchy and cheap when I just run the wires like everybody else. Plus, it's, how in the world do you got to get a flashlight in there to adjust them, because I always liked the flippers to be very responsive.
Mm-hmm.
And Gottlieb, you had lost so much movement, with that wire assembly, and then it had to be enough gap so the playfield comes down and doesn't get on the wrong side of the wire, and it was just a pain in the neck. So I was, we didn't have, I don't think we had any Chicago coin. Mostly it was Williams and Bally stuff.
And so that particular version of Gottlieb's flippers there were the early 60s.
Yeah.
Did you operate any in the 70s?
Well, I was out of there in the 70s. I was, after graduating college in 73, I was working for a company that put some of the early ATM machines in the banks, and I was installing them, working on ATM machines. And it wasn't until the 70s when we bought all those other older machines, and then in 79 starting a route. Well, when starting a route, you buy new stuff.
Mm-hmm.
You don't necessarily buy old stuff. So I was buying, the Flash. I bought Time Warp, which was the next one after Flash for Williams. I bought a Bally Paragon. I had Atari Football, Battle Zone, Astro Fighter by Gremlin. And then, Pac-Man comes out, and Mizpak and Galaga, and Tron and Robotron and Stargate and Defender, and it just took off after that.
Mm-hmm. During the beginning of your own operations, what was the best earning pin that you had?
Well, the Flash was a hot lick. In 79, the two biggest pinballs then was Flash and Atari Superman.
Mm-hmm.
The Flash was the first one that they actually had the number 89 bulbs for a flash effect on the playfield. And it was just in the center of the playfield for a lightning effect.
Mm-hmm.
I was also the first machine to use background sound for Williams. And even though it was just a tone that just kept getting higher as you went along, it just added so much to the game. Now, it would be boring, but back then, it was a hot lick,
Do you get much call from folks around town who are looking to buy games for their home for EMs?
Not really for EMs. I was at the auction. I was talking to one of my buddies from Nashville, and we were looking at, they had some EMs for sale at the auction, and he was saying, why don't people like these and stuff? And I said, well, because he never grew up with them. And he says, I like and the other guy was there. I said, yeah, I like them, And I said, that's because we grew up with it. We knew what to play and what to do with them. But, the EMs, your primary goal on an EM was to win a replay.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't to tell a storyline or complete, quest on the play field to, get this to there to whatever, kind of thing. Like it is today. I sold a Simpsons pinball party last week, and, there's all different modes on that thing where you've got to accomplish different things depending on what mode you're in on it.
Mm-hmm.
Where, on a regular electromechanical, you're just banging out points trying to get to the next replay level and accumulate replays. And at some places, you try to rack them up and then, sell them to the next kid standing there waiting to play, get your money back out of it.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a whole different game.
Yeah. And so I'm guessing that you have even less demand for bingos. Is that right?
I get a lot of these old guys coming in, and they'll say, "Man, that two in the blue game. That one with you get the three in the line, and it's got that screen that moves and stuff." And honestly, there's some places, some barns and stuff around town and in the woods that, have 30, 40 bingos still stacked up sitting. And another one of my friends was in South Carolina and said some guy told him he had a bunch of inline machines. What was an inline machine? I said, I think you're going down to see bingos.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, if you're going to South Carolina, you're probably going to see 6-card bingos, because that's what they ran in South Carolina for the most part. And sure enough, when he got down there were ticker tapes and stuff like that, 6-card bingos. And, that was their market, 6-card bingos.
So were there no 6 cards around when you were operating?
I never saw a 6-card. I don't think. Maybe, I'm trying to think, we had a United Bingo at Camp Pickett.
Really?
At the NCO Club. And that was probably the oldest thing. And maybe that was a multi-card machine, but it was in a different room than the rest of the stuff. Some of the stuff was kind of spread out, and some was in this room and some was in that room kind of thing. But everything was either the one with the 4 numbers that rotated, 4 of those, and then the side lines and the bottom line would shift.
Mm-hmm.
Sunset or Sun City or something like that.
Sun Valley?
Sun Valley, yeah. Sun Valley. I remember that in a little grocery store in Dinwiddie, servicing that. But a lot of county fairs, that kind of thing. Silver sales.
A lot of magic screen, huh?
Oh, yeah. That's what everybody wanted to play.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah.
So, for the United, you didn't do any servicing on that one?
No, I don't think I ever worked on it. It was the kind of thing where we just took the money, I took a meter read and roll the coin.
That's a good one, isn't it?
Yeah, I guess.
Now, did you ever play bingos for keeps?
No.
No.
I just play them at the shop. And the crazy thing, a lot of the places where we had bingos, I mean, we had them in a barber shop on the way to Fort Lee on Route 36, Petersburg, to Hopewell there, and Stoney's barber shop. And Stoney was a barber, and we had 2 bingos in there. Of course, a lot of his business was service guys at Fort Lee. And so when there weren't service guys there to cut hair, Stoney played the bingos himself.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was nothing to have to go collect Stoney twice a week, because Stoney had spent all his money in the bingo, and then he needed to get his half of the money back out of the bingo. Or Stoney played the bingo and had a big hit on it and wanted to get paid off on it, and he can't pay himself, so he has to have the money collected so that we refund the money that was the payout and then split the balance with him and all. But
oh, wow.
There's a lot of them there. Some of them, that people were worried about breaking in, and we had special drawers and stuff made because the original bingos had wooden legs, and those things would break. And so they had metal frames made to set the bingos in because it made the bingos less spindly, and you had less tilting and stuff on it and beat up because now they're sitting on a solid frame. And you could build them with a drawer so that all the money would go down to the drawer, and the guy who owned the location could get the money out, and we just read the meters, and he paid us based on the meters. And so you didn't even have to count the money. He just said, okay, you owe me $55, and then he paid you, and that was that. And he kept track of, what he thought it paid out and compared it to what you said paid out, and then everything worked out fine as long as you didn't have a problem with one of the meters.
Mm-hmm. And how commonly did that happen?
It happened at least once to me, and somebody else had to go. Of course, then, I'm the kid collecting it, and I said that, it took in this much and paid out that much, and the guy says, no, it didn't. It paid out this much and that much, so, we had agree to disagree, and so I left, and Paul Lamb went down there and checked and found out there was a problem with the meter. And so that all got smoothed over that way. But generally speaking, those meters were, pretty solid.
Mm-hmm. There's not a whole lot that can go wrong, and since they're pretty well sealed.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is there any particular type of EM that you prefer working on over any other?
Well, I kind of cut my teeth on the Williams because the two main pinballs I dragged back from the dump, one was a Williams Fiesta, and the other was a Williams Crossword. Mm-hmm. Both of them were gobble hole machines on the playfield, particularly the Crossword, which had 9 of them right in the center of the playfield for lighting up the letters in Crossword. And then the bowler that I ended up with that started it all, that was a United, which was real similar to, the Williams wiring and all. Mm-hmm. I also had a Bally USA, which was a game they came out with, I think, for some localities when they were, threatened with outlawing the bingos themselves. It was a flipperless pinball. It had 2 different courses going across the head glass, and there were red and blue bumpers. And honestly, I can't tell you what you were supposed to do, but I can tell you that it had a bingo-like replay mechanism in the head, but it only went to 99. It did not go into, it wasn't a 3-digit. It was only a 2-digit replay meter.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess you had to be hard up to want to play something like that. Maybe it was, similar to the Fun Cruise deal of simply, selling something that had bingo parts in it.
Could be. Yeah, I've wondered that. Bally made a few interesting one-offs that had the 2-digit replay meters, and I've always wondered about that myself. So you prefer working on Williams mechanisms then?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Uh-huh.
And you've mentioned the dump a couple times. Do you mind telling us that story?
Well, I was riding my bike and was probably a couple of miles from home, almost to where my grandparents lived, and ran into a friend from school, and he said, "May, let me show you what I found at the dump." So we go over to his place, and he had all these pieces of cannonballs and shrapnel and mini balls and stuff, because, Colonial Heights was in the midst of a lot of that Civil War stuff. And he said, well, where do you get all that stuff? Got it from the city dump. We're at the city dump. Where's the city dump? So we ride our bike to the city dump. Now, the city dump is, I think there's a giant mountain of trash there now, but it was essentially on the backside of South Park Mall in Colonial Heights.
Mm-hmm.
And at that time, you rode down a dirt road and kind of curved around. And then the first thing you came to is where the dump trucks dumped the garbage off on the right. And it was in its own area. And you kept on down the road. And then they had plowed through an area adjacent to the dirt road where you could throw household refuse, old TVs, sofas, that kind of stuff. And to the left, they had cut some roads, and they went back, and it was undeveloped, and it was just kind of sandy. It almost looked prehistoric. There was a lot of hills of, like, sand and water in the low areas and all, and they were like pieces of cannonball and stuff sticking out of the ground. And you could just scratch it and, pull pieces up. And so, I get a few of those. But I was more interested in all the other junk that people had thrown away. And at the time, police were, cracking down on these bingo gambling machines, and sometimes even baseball machines might get pulled into the sweep of picking up games. And they take them to the dump, and they bust them up with an axe and set them on fire. So I get to the dump, and there's like relay banks, step-up units, reflex units for bingos, all these kind of mechanical things, the ESCO, a pneumatic release thing from some exhibit supply pinball, found that and all. And so I take that stuff home and figure out how it works. Well, one day I went and they'd thrown the game company in town had thrown out a skee ball game. And it was Chicago coin game, skee bowl, and it was a skee ball that scored like a bowling machine. And the part where it would catch the balls when they went up the ramp and stuff, that was there. I took it home, set it up. We were bouncing baseballs, keeping score on an old adding machine, but then you had to go get the balls because once they fell through the hole, they were behind it. So I went back and got the trough that goes behind it and set that up, leaned it up with cinder blocks and stuff, and now the balls roll back to us. Mm-hmm. But after it bounces a while, that falls over. So I went back and got the side for it, and then got another piece of plywood and cut the two sides and put the thing back together. So now I have the whole part where the ball goes into the ball, they roll back to us and all. I'm thinking, hey, there's one side of the game still down there. So we go back with a friend, and we strap that to two bicycles, and we ride that home. So then I make another side and a masonite alley, and then I got a under part, and I've got it catching the balls using some mechanisms from Lionel switch tracks, but I need a scoring unit. So I go down to Ms. Killebrew, and she doesn't have anything. So I'm at a birthday party at the community center in Colonial Heights, and there's an old United bowler sitting off in a corner and doesn't work, dead. And so I come home and tell my parents, and so we know the guy that runs the parks department in Colonial Heights at the time. And so we happen to see him, my father and I ride around. We see him working on some swings. Stop, ask him. He checks in. He can't find anybody. Can't find out who donated it. It was probably some women's club, but nobody remembers it or anything. So he says, take the bowler, and if nobody misses it, it's yours. So I take the bowler. So that started me off. I ended up knocking the pins out of the hinge on the alley because on those early United bowlers, all the a lot of the scoring guts is underneath the bottom, and then just the reels are up in the top and the player step-up unit. So got that open, had a schematic in the bottom, learned to read the schematic, got it working. Following Christmas, bought a jukebox for $50 from Loveman's Jukebox in Petersburg. The next summer, back to the dump, and Virginia Music and Novelty had cleaned the warehouse out and had thrown out, I counted 10 pieces. So I rode back, got my mother in the Galaxy 500, and picked up a friend, and we went back to the dump and loaded 3 pinball machines, the Fiesta, the Crossword, and the Bally USA, into the car. We had them stacked in the trunk, stacked in the back seat. We were sitting with the heads in our lap, riding in the car, and rode home with those, and then ended up putting them up on 4 cinder blocks so I could play them. And then after the next summer, I went to work for Virginia Music and Novelty, and got some legs for them from Virginia Music and Novelty, and then I was good to go.
Well, cool. So what was that first jukebox that you got?
It was a AMI D from 51. It was AMI's first 45 RPM jukebox. They had a D40, which was still 78, and a D80, which was a 45. That was our transition year.
Mm-hmm. And do you work on mini jukeboxes nowadays?
I sell Rockola CD jukeboxes, and then I've got some a couple of Rockola 45 boxes, and then I sold a Seaberg, a 1951 Seaberg B, and then I restored a 52 Seaberg C, which I have in the front of the showroom now for sale. And of course, a lot of the stuff that we had back then were Seabergs at Virginia Music and Novelty, so I kind of cut my teeth on that. And I had a Seaberg B after I got rid of the the AMI D80. I bought a Seaberg from Virginia Music and Novelty for $25, and had that in the basement, along with a Williams Snafu pinball and a Bally sharpshooter gun game that they told me to take to the dump because the compressor to shoot the balls was bad. Turned out the hose was broken underneath the gun. And it was like narrow, I want to say hairdryer hose, but nobody knows what hairdryer hose is anymore. But basically spiral wire with a clear coating over it. And so I just, stretched a little higher, reattached it to the gun, and then boom, it was working. So that was a free game. And later they had a United Bank Pool, which was a shuffle alley game where a rack of balls came down first, and you tried to get down the center. If you got right under the one ball, you got 30 points. A little left and right was 20, and if you caught the corners, you got 10 points. Then it went up in the air, and then 15 balls came down on individual arms, all spread out, and you had 4 shots to bank the puck off the sides and sweep all the balls off the playfield. And you got 6 racks per game. Well, I was hoping that they were going to throw that out because it was sitting in the back for a while. Well, they gave it to one of the other guys. He took it home, but after he played it a while, he got tired of it, and he sold it to me for $25. So then I had that down in the basement as well.
That's a good recurring number you got there.
Yeah, it was. Of course, that was a lot of money back then. When I went to work for them, it was $1 an hour, and after the first summer, I got a raise to $1.25, which was the minimum wage in the late '60s, $1.25.
And you mentioned this briefly earlier. What did your parents think about you working on bingos?
Well, they never, I never brought the subject up.
It's funny how that works out.
I was just working on coin machines.
Gotcha. So, do you know if they had an adversity to gambling machines, or if they knew anything about it?
I don't know, but I've taken them to Las Vegas 4 times. They enjoyed that.
Oh, really? That's cool.
Yeah.
So, well, any parting thoughts on EMs or bingos?
No, but it was a great time back then when, everybody got a job when they were a teenager. Of course, most guys were delivering papers and stuff. But, once you got a driver's license, everybody went to work. Now, no kids go to work. And to tell you the truth, if some 15-year-old kid came in here to get a job, I don't know that I could hire a 15 or a 16 or a 17. I've hired a 20-year-old, and unless I told him specifically what to do, I couldn't get anything out of him. He would sit and read a magazine. It's just a different mindset from what it used to be back then. Just everybody assumed you go out and you get a job.
I've never understood that mentality myself, the modern one.
Yeah.
So, I've always been kind of a go-getter myself. But, okay, well, Charles, thank you very much for your time and spending some time talking about the old games with me. I appreciate it.
Well, thanks for the invitation.
Thank you again to my guest, Charles Rowland, and thank you again for listening. My name again is Nick Baldridge. You can reach me at foramusementonlypodcast@gmail.com, or you can call me on the Bingos line. That's 724-BINGOS1, 724-246-4671. You can listen to us on iTunes, Stitcher, Pocket Casts, via RSS, on Facebook, on Twitter at Bingo Podcast. You can follow me on Instagram at nbaldridge, or you can listen to us on our website, which is foramusementonly.libsyn.com. Thank you very much for listening, and I'll talk to you next time.